people say it's because someone who cries more, a parent will tend to focus more on them. But then that's not how we should be doing things. We should always be saying we are all crucial. We are all crucial, important for what we do. And indeed, I've said many a times, and those who've listened to me in the past, where air traffic controllers say, we are the ones who generate money for this company. And I say to myself, and I say to them, show me a single air traffic controller who can stand on top of the mountain and tell an aircraft to turn left. And that's the one that can do everything for ATNS. But it requires each and every one of us, and you are a crucial point and a crucial cog of us to deliver what we need to deliver as a company, and we appreciate that. And I want to close here and wish you well for the masterclass. But in doing that, I just want to touch on where we find ourselves at a company, as ATNS. And I'm fully aware that SATSIPA is not part of ATNS. All right. And so I'm not talking to you as a part of us, as if you are an organization of ATNS. But I think it's important for me to talk about where we find ourselves as a country in aviation. COVID is a challenge that we're all faced with, but it's a challenge that actually in any cloud, there's always a silver lining. And I've always said that we shouldn't squander a crisis. We should be looking at what's happening and saying, what is it that we can take out of this? And what is it that we can do better? Colleagues, if after COVID, if at all we'll ever get there, we will continue to do things the same way as we used to do them in the past, then we wouldn't have exploited this crisis as we should. And we look to you to assist us to say, how can we do that? How can we find a silver lining in this? What can we do better going forward? And we as ATNS, we also see the challenges that are emanating from COVID. As an example, so we didn't go for the permission application, which was supposed to have been done last year. That has forced us to extend some of the contracts that we have, or the lifespan of the instruments that you on a day-to-day basis have to keep alive. You are keeping some of this on life support at great cost to your time, your effort, your stress, your lives, and everything. And that we really need to say we appreciate that and invite you to work with us. How can we do that? How can we maintain them, keep them going, keep them alive on firmer ground? I'm talking about the situation of ESCOM. What is happening is not something that just happened last week. So the blackouts that we had this week are not something that just happened because of something that wasn't done last week. It's years of things that were done or not done. They should have been done. That. And we rely on you to tell us, this we need to do. We can't postpone this. We can't defer this. This needs to be done now. So we are really saying we need you in many aspects for the good of our country, for the good of our continent, and for the good of aviation in general, to work with you in different things. We're not doing as we should. And I would like to invite the executives that I'm glad that you are having this forum. But I think just having points whereby we engage as the executives, you tell us what exactly you are doing, how we can assist. We provide certain support, but then I think we could do more in terms of ensuring that the objectives that I pointed out are achieved and strengthened as we move forward. as yourself move forward as an association and ATNS as a company for the good of our country and the continent as that. I'm not going to be staying long. Unfortunately, I'm in the middle of another meeting, so I'll be logging out, and I want to wish you all the best for the masterclass today. I'll probably listen in the background for my iPad while I'm in the other meeting, just to hear what are the things that they're dealing with, and so that I can benefit as I move forward as well. With that, I wish you the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malinga. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Chief Operating Officer of ATNS. Thank you very much, sir, for an excellent delivery. I think the message is well received, and you have indeed touched on critical points in your delivery, and they do certainly resonate with this ATSEP Masterclass. Thank you, sir. And as you normally say, and I quote, it is most highly appreciated. Close quote. Thank you. Let us now call upon the second speaker for this segment. For those who do not know, our next speaker has shot to fame in a space of 3 months in office. She has been featured on various electronic publications already. I have been reliably informed that of late, she is only signing autographs by appointment. In fact, you might even have to write a submission and put your request to a panel to evaluate the viability of allocating a slot for you to get a permission to secure an appointment with her. She has been hard at work, and on the 6th of November 2021, she was finishing her first 100 days in office. She is the Executive President of the South African ATSEP Association. I call her Madam President, and I'm not a proponent of breaking existing protocols. Distinguished participants, the Executive President of SATSIPA, Orifile Mtombeni. Madam, you may address the participants.
Thank you, Program Director. Good afternoon, Program Director, speakers, moderators, and distinguished guests. We as SATSIPA are a voluntary, independent, non-profit association of individuals who are gathered for the purpose of associating and exchanging experience and teaching knowledge in the provision of technical support for air traffic control and management in order to maintain a safe sky for all. On behalf of SATSIPA, we are deeply honored to welcome you today to today's ATSEP Masterclass. We are grateful to you for taking some time out to join us in this great event. Today, we celebrate International Day of the Air Traffic Safety Electronics Personnel, ATSEP. And this year is quite special as we also celebrate 50 years anniversary of the International Federal and Air Traffic Safety Electronic Association, which is IFATSIA. So today, 50 years ago, on the 12th and the 13th of November, 1971, a meeting took place in Brussels between the founding members of IFATSIA. At the occasion, they agreed with the terms of constitution to be presented the following year at an inaugural assembly held in Frankfurt. Now, just to give a bit of background, an ATSEP is defined by ICAO as one who is proven competent in installation, operation, maintenance, management activities, teaching, those involved in safety management, security management, and quality management of communications, navigations, surveillance, or air traffic management systems. ATSEPs then further guarantee the accuracy, integrity, availability, and continuity of these systems and services around the globe 24/7 throughout the year. While these tasks which are performed by ATSEPs may be on a wide assortment of CNS systems, and this requires a wide range of capabilities, expertise, knowledge, and skills in areas of electronics, computer science, and computer networking. ATSEP activities can also range from technical level to high-level engineering tasks as well. As we are now aware that ATSEPs are a key enabler in safe and efficient provision of air navigation services, and that the work done by ATSEPs contribute to the safe, resilient, and smooth activity of the entire aviation system. Today, we celebrate ATSEPs. We invite you to sit back as fellow ATSEPs share their experience and expertise on topics which include ATSEP licensing, future ATSEP requirements, as well as the impact COVID-19 has had on the ATSEP environment. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the executive president. The president has indeed spoken, and in keeping with the spirit of not contaminating existing protocols, I'm certainly not going to paraphrase what she has delivered. All I can say, well received, and thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to appreciate the joys of rubbing shoulders with reliable sources who are not famous for spreading fake news, nothing shallow or superficial here. I have been reliably informed that the moderator for the topic on the impact of COVID-19 on the ATSEP environment is standing by to delve deep into these conversations, which they will probably be preceded by the speakers sharing their insights. I am not qualified to speak on the topic. All I can say, I can already hear the countdown of Vice President for Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Engineer Lisa Tele, who will take us through on the next session that speaks to the impact of COVID-19 on the ATSEP environment. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Program Director. And good afternoon to you, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my great honor to be a moderator of this session for this day when we're celebrating the air traffic services engineering personnel. The theme is the importance of ATSEP. The topic that I will be taking you through today is the one of the impact of COVID-19 on ATSEP environment, which is a very important discussion topic during these unprecedented times that we find ourselves in. Now, this topic has got two subtopics, and I would like to introduce you to our first speaker, who will be speaking on a subtopic of lessons learned, the impact on operations, and the journey towards recovery. Mrs. Boitumelo Mazibuko started her career in aviation with ATSEP in 2008 as an engineering learnership student at the Aviation Training Academy. She started her ATSEP career at Bramfisher International Airport in Bloemfontein in 2009. In September 2015, she became a supervisor, technical support in FABL, and was then promoted to manager, technical support for Bloemfontein, Kimberley and Uppington in June 2018, where she is responsible for a team of ATSEPs and administrative staff. She holds a national diploma in electrical engineering, a bachelor of technology in electrical engineering, and a bachelor of technology in business administration from the Central University Technology. She completed 9 conversations in leadership with the Worldview Academy and a management development program with University of Witwatersrand. I would like to invite Mrs. Boitumelo Mazibuko to speak to us on this subtopic. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Good afternoon, Lisa and esteemed guest. My topic today is on the ATSEP environment, the impact of ATSEPs, the impact of COVID-19 on the ATSEP environment. My overview is as follows. I'm going to be covering the background, the focus areas, the challenges that we went through during the COVID-19, the road to recovery, and closing on that. So the background. The COVID-19 pandemic is part of an ongoing pandemic of the coronavirus disease 2019. caused by a severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. On the 5th of March, a first case of COVID-19 was reported in South Africa, confirming the spread of the virus into South Africa. And followed by on the 15th, the President of South Africa, Mr. Ramaphosa, declared a national state of disaster. On the 23rd, national lockdown was announced starting on the 27th of March 2020. In response to the outbreak, following the President's announcement on the lockdown, actions had to be taken to minimize the spread of coronavirus and flatten the curve. As a proactive intervention to try and curb the spread of COVID-19, technical services implemented a minimum service level roster, which would assist in social distancing and compliance with the COVID-19 restrictions. There were some focus areas that we had to immediately focus on. The short-term ones were as follows. All technical personnel that were executing projects on sites were recalled, and all accommodations were cancelled as a result of the pronounced lockdown. Suspension of all routine maintenance works that involved sleepovers were also suspended. There was also suspension of all engineering project site works, cancellation of business trips, including maintenance activities for VSAT and NAFISAT systems at various countries. So for the short time, we had to suspend all activities. And of course, these were just temporary measures to absorb the shock. In the meantime, there were vigorous plans to make sure that operations continue and the health of employees is well taken care of. ATNS has been given a responsibility to provide a safe and expeditious air travel in South Africa, and ATSEPs play an integral part in achievement of this in South Africa. So if you would look at the picture that is being displayed right now, these are some of the activities that the ATSEPs would be involved with. So although there is a suspension of activities, the equipment is still running. There were some airports that were closed, but others are still running. And because of the interconnectivity that we have in our country, we had to then make sure that operations still continue even during this time of lockdown. To move further, we had to move to midterm focus areas. The implementation of the COVID-19 response plan allowed some of the employees to work from home, whilst critical technical staff were rostered to attend to corrective maintenance. There was issuing of project permits for project-related activities classified under the essential services in accordance with COVID-19 essential service regulations. We had to always make sure that we're keeping abreast of current news, any information that we can get, any updates, anything related to what is happening with all of the developments with COVID-19 once it was announced in South Africa. Distribution of occupational hygiene supplies such as hand sanitizers, gloves, and masks for all stations and centers took place, and this was a success. Departmental and any other critical meetings which could have been carried out, that were carried out successfully through visual platforms such as Microsoft Teams and Business Skype. Of course, during this time, because this was something very new to us, there were lots and lots of challenges. There were some that are not mentioned here, but I will be talking on them. Some of the challenges that we experienced was some employees which were required to actively work from home during this hard lockdown, but they didn't have the tools of trade to productively work from home. Demand caused low turnaround times for sourcing of screens, screening equipment, devices related to COVID-19 supplies. The maintaining of social distancing between employees working on especially mechanical work, changing of radar motors, all of that was still a challenge. So people had to work together. Maintenance that we had to do of 1.5 meters away from each other to avoid the spread of the virus, but that has been a challenge for us. There was also increased vandalism at remote sites due to unobserved inactivity. So we have lots of remote sites that we take care of, and during this time of lockdown and inactivity at our sites, we experienced a lot of vandalism at our remote sites. On-job and equipment-based training could not be conducted, and this is very vital to the ATSEP operations. Commitment of business travel initiatives to meet company obligations, they also failed. They could not be met during this time because there was suspension of most of the flights going in and around South Africa and outside. We had struggles with equipment spares because we couldn't get any flights coming in from different countries. And another big thing that also affected us a lot is the South African dynamics of load shedding. Load shedding is still persistent, but during this time it was very difficult to operate because now our minimum service level during COVID-19 meant there was less people at work and there were more faults going on at sites, and we needed the ATSEPs to attend to these. Low staff morale. The staff morale was mainly caused by the disconnect and the fact that people didn't have tools of trade. The disconnect is mainly due to the fact that people started working from home. Their home dynamics as well. There was scares of this new thing that is happening. People were very scared to go out because we had to all protect ourselves. The communication that came from the company assisted in that, but the disconnect was felt because when you're working from home, it's very different to when you are at work because you are fully focused in there. ATSEPs working from home pose different challenges as well in terms of coordination from the supervisor, because now there needed to be a lot of coordination from the supervisors at work in order to make sure that people are attending to all of the required maintenances that needed to take place. And we also needed to retune and refine our minimum service point whereby we communicated about the times that people needed before they can be activated. Because when you're working from home, you're always not ready. And now you needed to go. The biggest challenge was now in normal operations, people are all sitting at work. Whenever there's a corrective, immediately they just jump to it and go and take a car and attend to the remote site. But when you're working from home, the person still needs to be given a chance to go through and go to the work environment, take the company vehicle, and then they can proceed with the work. These were some of the challenges, although there are others that were presented during that time. The road to recovery, this is an ongoing recovery that we're working on. Continuous reviews of the departmental plans and targets. Continuous awareness of good hygiene practices for work and home. These are the things that we continuously communicate to people. Continuous implementation of OHS requirements at all workspaces, including remote sites. In order for us to do this is that we make sure that every ATSEP personnel has the required hand sanitizers, all of the hygienic stuff that they can use even when they're going to the remote sites. Continuous engagements with employees regarding new developments and policy changes, of which a lot has come about during this time. This all is in order for us to continue with operations under the current conditions that we are in. Review of all ATNS facilities and workstations to ensure compliance with social distancing. The minimum staff rostering to ensure employees' safety and service delivery with minimum impact in case of positive cases in an ATSU at a given time. So you would have noted that in South Africa during this time, there has been different levels that were pronounced. So with the hard lockdown, we started at level 5. And as we continue, the current levels, the levels that has been pronounced is very different to what was pronounced last year. So as time goes on, from 2020, we used to talk about just a level 3. Now it's an adjusted lockdown level 3. So as a country, we've come together and always refining and getting to know and getting to live with our current situations. So in closing, the ubiquitous and highly contagious coronavirus mutates into different and more infectious strains. At this stage, we don't know how long the COVID-19 pandemic will last, but we have noted that as a country and also as a company and within the ATSEP division, there are many supporting structures which we have needed during this time. And with our coordination, cooperation, and collaboration, we were able to move through and get past the previous year. And it's an ongoing phase that we will continue with. So those are the 3 things that we saw that assist us a lot in continuing. COVID-19 impact on how we do operations. The new normal has forced most companies to reevaluate their strategies and introduce new ways of still delivering efficient and expeditious service without compromising safety. However, the COVID-19 pandemic presented ATSEP's environment with an opportunity to apply new ways of thinking and different ways of doing business. This is still an ongoing phase which we are working on, but we progress as and when is required. There's a lot of implementations and new developments that we're busy with, and all of those are trying to talk to what we're currently going through. The new normal has meant that a lot of ATSEPs in ATNS particularly are working from home. There has been other electronic personnel who have been working from home, but for ATNS, this was something very new, but we have adjusted to it and it's working quite well at this moment for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mazibuko, for that very insightful and informative presentation. And I would like to open the floor to all participants to pose their questions. You can post your questions on the question and answer, which is provided on this platform to the presentation that has just been delivered. And you have covered quite a few at length on the measures in place that we have put in place in response to the pandemic. So I think you have covered what the negative, what did it bring, which is negative, and as well as what is positive. I've learned in life that, you know, what you deem as negative is not necessarily what the next person may see as negative, and the reverse is also true. So I think you covered a lot of measures that you had to come up with in that environment, you know, to respond to the situation that we were faced with the ATSEPs having to be recalled from sites, and also what challenges were posed to the business itself by the pandemic, and also to the employees, which are the ATSEPs in this case in your environment. So what would you say, what was the most positive or most important thing that we had to learn as a business, as well as in that environment, the ATSEPs that had to learn, which was positive for them, that is posed by the pandemic?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the most positive that I would ideally want to talk about right now is the fact that people can actually juggle their home life, work and home life balance. Initially, I mentioned the fact that there were so many dynamics with regards to people working from home. there's been so many different advancements to that we realize.
Thank you very much for the
people can actually juggle their home life, work-life balance with working
ideally
under
want to
this
talk about
environment,
right
because
now
we also
is the
have to
fact
make
that,
sure that people are safe. People can actually means that people working from home are much safer than work in an environment where all of us are there. Then it's much better. Initially,
We've also learned that
I mentioned the fact that
to make sure that
there were so many
people are
dynamics
safe,
with regards to
it's
people
also good
working from
to
home.
also go on
There's
the
been so many
team-based rostering that we've been working
different
on.
advancements to that we realize.
Thank you very much for the
people can
Right.
actually juggle their home
we
life,
have worked
work-life
on
balance,
team-based
with
rostering
working
to make sure that
really
people
under
are
this
safe
environment,
right
because
now.
we also
Is
have to
the
make
fact
sure
that
that
in
people
case
are
of,
safe. People
and
can
it
actually
could
means
juggle
that
positive
people
that
working from home are much safer than work in an environment where all of us are compromised. Then it's much better. Initially, I mentioned the fact that
to make sure that
there were so many dynamics with regards to people
also good
working from
those
home.
also go on
There's been so many
this has meant a lot,
different
especially with
advancements
regards
to
to
that
saving
we
also for the
realize
Thank you very much because
there would be a lot of juggle their
we
home life,
have worked on
balance,
to make sure that people are safe
right
now.
now.
We also have to make sure that people are safe. We are able to
people
attend
can actually
to
means
meetings
that
people are there
working from home are much
safer
safer than work in an environment where all of us are compromised. Then
Thank
it's
you
much
very
better.
much,
Initially,
also
I
that
mentioned the fact that
to make sure that
there were so many dynamics with regards to
negative.
people
I think there is a
those
question that is
also there's been so many different advancements with regards
that
to
how an
that
ATNS
we
Thank you
realize
very much
with
because
staff morale,
people can actually juggle their home
we
life,
have
work
worked
life
on
I think you mentioned
balance,
that
with
staff
working
morale
make sure that
was
people are
low,
safe
because we
due
also
to
have to
being
make
faced
sure
with
that
the
people
telephone
are
that
safe.
we are there to
People can actually
change
means
sides
that
working the ATSEP
life work in an environment where all of us are compromised. Then
Thank
it's
you
much
very much.
better. Initially,
Also,
I mentioned the fact that there were so many dynamics with regards to people
I think there is a
those
question that is
also there's been so many different advancements with regards to
how an
that
ATNS
we realize
very much
because people can actually juggle their home life, work life
I think you
balance,
mentioned that staff
to make sure that
morale
people are
was
safe
low,
because we also have to make sure that people are safe. People can actually means that working from home are much safer than work in an environment where all of us are compromised. Then it's much better. I mentioned the fact that
to make sure that
there were so many dynamics there's been so many different advancements
that how an ATNS
very much because
situation
we have
work life. I think you mentioned
to make sure that people are safe. We also have to make sure that people are safe. People can actually decide working from home safer than work in an environment where all of us are compromised. Then it's much better.
to make sure that
there's been so many different advancements
very much because a bit more. We use other
on their hygiene. Social distances, which is the regulations for this pandemic. It also encouraged people to improve on that, which is a safety measure. So that will be, I believe, that will be the culture going forward for us to keep that, for us to keep those safety measures, not only for our personnel, but for the equipment that they're working on as well. So the other question that I wanted to pose is how did you keep with the regulations requirements or compliance, and also meeting with the SLAs that are in place in your environment?
Thank you for that question. The regulatory requirements, I think during a big part of last year, there was a time when we couldn't have the flight calibrations as required for our VORs. So we had to apply for exemptions to make sure that we are still within requirements. That assisted, because now we are keeping abreast of everything else that is happening in our country, and also that what is also going to affect us. So when we saw that, most of us are always making sure that we are keeping abreast of the current news and making sure that we know what is going to change, or whether we can be able to fly, or whether we can get assistance. So with regards to that, on the one of the challenges that we had last year with the flight cal crew is that we had to apply for exemptions, which we got in time, and that assisted that we don't have our equipment being switched off. With our SLAs, normally we would have reviews every single year. So it's the service level agreements that we have with regards to the services that we providing. So with our reviews, we'd had to make sure that we comply by making sure that we make sure that we get enough time for people to make sure that they can attend to the faults that are there. And the best part is that with our service level agreement, it does allow you some time for traveling. So the response time, we made sure that people are attending within the required times. That's why I said initially with our minimum service, the COVID-19 minimum service level agreement, we even had to state in our plan that the time a person takes before they can get to work. And that was also looked into by making sure that we adhere to our SLAs. We have different SLAs at different stations, and most stations have had to review and make sure that they can be able to comply with all of those. Constant communication with the users, the end users as well. Whenever you're experiencing a problem or whatever that you're working with, making sure that we constantly communicate with them in order for them to be assured that the equipment will be up and running. The problems that we had with not being able to provide spares, I think we were assisted by the fact that most of our equipment in ATNS, we usually have a main and a standby. So that made sure that services are not down. So thank you.
Thank you very much. There's two more questions that are on the chat. I would like to pose them, and in the interest of time, at the same time, and then you can respond to them before we close or before we move to the next speaker. One question says, ATSEPs are known to be tough mentally. However, we know that as humans, we are all susceptible to life challenges. What are some of human factors issues that you have come up with and affected the employees, and what have been done? Have you used the services of human factors expertise we have in the organization? If not, why is that? And then the second question says, do you think management dislikes the idea? Much. There's two more questions that are on the chat.
I think on the contrary, and in the with working from home, I don't think management hates the thought of not having staff around, because ATSEP's
Why is
personnel
that?
are highly trained.
And then the second question
And
says,
you
do you
miss-
think management dislikes the idea
Yes,
of
we should
aviation
have
as
an
a
training that they've had.
much?
They are very good at
There's two
response.
more
And you
questions that
actually
are on
want
the
them at
chat.
their
I would
best so
like
that
to
they can
pose
respond
them.
to all of the
And in
corrective
the
with working
maintenances
from
that you would
home,
need them
I
to.
don't think management
So
hates
not
the
having them
thought
around,
of not having
you know
staff
that
around.
they're available.
And
Because there were some
challenges
previously,
it's
but
Why is
right
it?
now we are at
And then the
stage whereby
second
we
question
know that
says, do
the
you
response
think
time of
management
this and
dislikes
this
the idea of
personnel training that they've had.
mentally
They're
and
very tough. I think especially the ATSEPs have always been the go-to people whenever any other department or any other person needs assistance. And thus people would assume that ATSEPs are much tougher than everybody else. And the fact that they are the ones who don't normally talk. I don't think if you heard Mr. Malinga initially when he said that even when they go to stations, because ATSEPs never really complain about anything, so they actually kind of sometimes miss going to them and finding out how they're doing. It was predominantly because most of the ATSEPs were males, and thus you find that males generally don't like talking about how they feel. So it seems as if they are tougher than everybody else. But during this time, ATNS availed one of the platforms that we've always had, which is the ICAS. We never really used HR because whenever we do HR is because of a request, a special request. So what management has been doing currently is just to make sure that we communicate the fact that you do have support, and if you really need somebody to talk to, please contact ICAS. Please contact ICAS so that you can get all the assistance that you can. And if you really need to talk to your manager about something, a challenge that you're experiencing, let's come together, talk about it, see how we can better work around it. There's been cases where people have felt ill, and we communicate that there's nothing wrong with when you're feeling ill that you take leave so that you can recuperate, get well, and come back to work much stronger. So yes, the company has always made us seem like we are tough, and luckily, or fortunately, we've been able to handle most of the things that we've been required to assist with, and we'll continue doing so. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Buitumelo Mazibuko, thank you very much for responding so well to those questions. And thank you for such a delivered presentation on this subtopic. Thank you. Now, distinguished guests, would like to move to the next speaker in this subtopic. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have two subtopics under this session. The next subtopic is dealing with logistics and projects implementation during COVID-19. And our speaker is Mr. Kulekani Truman Ngobo, who will be taking as topic. Introduce him before he speaks. Mr. Kulekani Ngobo has an advanced master's degree in engineering from INEC University in France. He specialized in communication, navigation, surveillance, and satellite aviation technologies, where he graduated with cum laude. He also has an MBA degree, where he graduated with 13 distinctions, and also has an honors degree and a bachelor's degree in science, in computer engineering rather, from the University of Cape Town. Mr. Ngobo in 2020 graduated in the International Leadership Development Program from GIBS. He has 17 years of engineering experience. He started his career as a graduate engineer at the Institute of Maritime Technology. In 2005, he moved to be a development software artifacts and GIS applications. In 2008, he worked for Thales as a software engineer, worked with the teams in international specialists. He also worked in the Netherlands and Thailand Mr. Ngobo joined ATNS in 2012 as a senior engineer. He has been managing acquisition and implementation of high-profile aviation CapEx programs and solutions to meet with the current future needs of the air traffic navigation services. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to hand over to Mr. Kulekani Ngobo to take us through the second subtopic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated. And I would like to welcome all the ladies and gentlemen, the special guests, acquaintances, and colleagues. So as Lisa said, I will be taking you through a presentation that pertains to the impact of COVID on project execution and other associated logistics. So I will be giving you an account of what we have experienced and what has been our responses to that. And we'll be looking at various aspects like financial. We'll also be looking at schedules. We'll also be looking at the impact on assets and as well as human factors. So as a background, I would like to just give you a brief overview of what ATNS is responsible for. Particularly the areas that affect ATSEP. We are responsible for providing and maintaining technologies, be it communication, navigation, surveillance, and these technologies are not just enough to be provisioned, but they need to be safe, reliable, and efficient. So what that implies is that we need to adhere to certain ICAO stipulations or SAPs in line with the required availability, reliability factors, and so forth. We know that the mandate of ATNS obviously is providing safety in the skies. And with that being said, those technologies, they get to assist greatly in that regard. So we do manage and control the national airspace through the provision of these technologies. And therefore, we do have to monitor the infrastructure, ensuring that we adhere to safety levels because there are acceptable level of safety that are required. Nonetheless, we know that we've been hit by a curveball, especially with regards to the COVID-19 epidemic impact, and we had to reprioritize some of the plans that we had. That necessitated changes in some of the deployment activities that we needed to do. So we had to reprioritize some of the programs. We had to look into deferring some of the programs and so forth, while at the same time ensuring that we adhere to the acceptable levels of safety as mentioned earlier. So we are aware of this slide and also in line with the classification by ICAO on the types of projects that we find ourselves delivering, especially in aviation sector. So some of them are communication systems, navigation, surveillance, IT, software artifacts, office furniture fittings, building upgrades, and so forth. So, and we know the typical examples
There's two more
of these
questions that are on the
systems
chat.
that we are involved in. Also, so that's the list of projects that we tend to focus on. The types of projects collectively, these are referred to as a CapEx program, or especially in portfolio, which is a capital expenditure program that we need to deploy in order to support the safety management system. We know the objectives, or the mandate rather, for ATNS is that we need to keep and maintain safety management system, which is then supported by this CNS and related infrastructure. As you can see over here, these are intertwined. There is interrelation of all these. You touch one system, it affects the others. So there is integrative approach. While you're deferring some projects, you also need to take into account what the impact is going to be negatively on other systems that heavily rely on that. So as you can see, this is a pictorial or diagrammatical view of the systems that we get to deploy, then that gives rise to the service that we render as ATNS, which is an ANSP. So coming into the core of our discussion. I did mention that obviously generic view is that COVID did affect finances significantly. So we had to also adjust because it's either you flee or you fight. So we decided in some aspects we needed to fight, and in some instances we needed to flee because that was the safest thing to do. But as you can see, our CapEx portfolio was significantly affected. When it comes to commitment, cash flow, and capitalization commitment, we may be aware of it. This refers to the amount of programs or projects that we need to contract on an annual basis. For example, 2021-22, we needed to commit or to contract 72 million worth of projects. That is in rands. And then we needed to spend roughly around 565 million on programs. That was the original permission plan that was passed in 2017. And we needed to come up with assets worth 296 million. So which is a tall order. But nonetheless, we needed to adjust, as indicated, we needed to reprioritize CapEx to see what projects can be deferred, which ones have a potential of being cancelled, and which ones needed to be delayed a bit so that we can survive this epidemic. So then that gave rise to a new plan because the reprioritization activity started in mid-2020, where we looked at the program itself. So which means when it comes to commitment for the year, we are now looking at 423 million worth of projects, and the cash flow is 323, which is maybe a saving of around 250 million. It's not really a saving, but a deferral. And capitalization, when it talks to asset, we really don't want to touch so much on that, and I'll tell you why later on, because that talks to assets, because we know the impact of assets having had lessons learned from other entities, whether it's national or international, that when you touch on assets, you're touching on the future of the company. So you have to strike a well-balanced approach when you look into that. So that was the first impact that it had on the budget, having to reprioritize, having to cancel some projects and having to defer some of them. So that is number one. Pertaining to the system engineering activities and project management activities, we have a process that we follow. Sometimes it's tailored and sometimes we follow the core of it. The yellow activities are all those that were significantly affected. Those are the activities that were significantly affected during COVID. For instance, when you're looking at technical feasibility analysis, that is when we go to sites, do site establishment, ascertain the performance of the system, and see what else could be affected in relation to the replacement activities that we have. This, therefore, resulted in a lot of desktop feasibility assessment, as opposed to on-site activities. We needed to do quite a lot of desktop exercise so that we can continue. Those were our resilient efforts or tenacious efforts in the aim of continuing with the service provision. And environmental requirements, they've been affected greatly. That this may also touch on the site security issues and so forth, so which has been affected. And there's no more face-to-face engagement, so therefore we quickly had to adapt and to evolve into using certain application digital media to converse and to continue with the work, and also do contract negotiations and verification and validation activities. So a lot of these activities, they also affect ATSEP directly, because they are also inherently involved in these activities that we plan for. So in terms of the skills transfer, as Boitumelo did mention, that training was significantly impacted in the process, and then I'll just tell you how we managed to do that later on. So I'm not going to bore you with so much details, but those are all the activities that were affected that we needed to come up with a different plan. So looking at the impact, some were positive and some were not so positive, because as I said, there was no more face-to-face. But nonetheless, that gave an opportunity for more people to be involved, because there's no more small rooms. In a digital platform, you can all engage. There's no more logistics associated with accommodation, associated with the number of people that can be catered for in that facility when we're doing those planning activities. So you get to invite quite a lot of ATSEPs to be involved in the delivery of these activities. So also the most important thing was that we needed to have additional resources, time for a second. It just became less and less because there's no more cutoff time when you stop working, because you are forever at work. So which means you are constantly engaging, whether it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night, we still continue with that. When it comes to the site surveys and site establishments, we know that there were travel restrictions, so we needed to find new skills. For example, our techs and our engineers had to learn new skills pertaining to photography, virtual reality, and cloud technology that assisted greatly. For example, we had to do 3D simulator program, and we know that there was travel restrictions, so we had to take those pictures ourselves. We had to learn about digital photography and lighting and all these things. People had to attend online courses and so forth. And we needed to find other ways of continuing with other verification and validation activities, especially when it comes to FET. Now that we can't travel, we needed to find ways to move into the virtual platforms and still continue to do that, and look at psychomotor activities that can be done, achieved at that time. But however, that affected factory training and sequencing of FET, because now normally you start with the theoretical training, specialist, psychomotor, and OJTI. Now you get these crisscrossing from that point onwards. So manufacturing and sourcing was also affected, but there is always a silver lining, because whenever there's a challenge, we also try to find a solution in that. So delivery and so forth. So yeah, you will get, I believe, the slides, and if you need proper details pertaining to each and every one of these activities, how it affected us, we're more than welcome to engage us. But yeah, so there's quite a lot of challenges that we faced, and there's quite a lot of resilient efforts that we responded with in the process, so that we keep tabs with their progress. So, for example, when we talk to logistics, specifically shipment and transportation, we know that we use the sequencing of when we're delivering these, whether it's LRUs or spares and so forth, so that we can support the maintenance activities. We can see that COVID negatively impacted our response times from the manufacturer side, and correction therefore is impacted, spares availability, turnaround times, and so forth. And overall corrective maintenance was affected because there is bottlenecks in the logistics area. However, we did engage with the service providers to try and source spares to be available locally, to be produced locally, and to also find standard exchange, so that we don't wait in the line while the spare is being rectified. You know, it takes 20 days for shipment to the factory, 20 days back, and 20 days to rectify. In actual fact, there is a turnaround time of 60 days. Whereas if there's a standard exchange, you give the manufacturer the spare, it gives you the one that is available. So those are all the things that we had to opt for, and sweating off the asset. And also we're trying to look at various ways where we can improve shipment. As you can see, there's different models. The ones that we use is XWorks, a combination of XWorks, CIP, and DDPs. And because those talk to the price, and they also talk to the efficiency of the service provision. But now, these are some of the results, typical examples that we had to resort to, especially when it comes to the factory acceptance, because we couldn't travel to all these countries to conduct an assessment, verification, and validation prior to the equipment being shipped into the country. So, which means we had to opt for virtual reality mechanisms, cloud technology, so that we have different feeds. We can observe how, while they do that at factory, we question certain things, we look at the results, and you see, it's as if you are there, even though you are sitting comfortably observing COVID protocol in an environment here in South Africa. So those were some of the initiatives that we opt for, and the results of that are actually positive, because when we presented with the challenge, you try to find a solution. Just to summarize, I'm sorry I'm taking your time. So overall, these are the projects that we've been involved in during COVID since 2019 up until now, and you can see there's a lot of blues. It's not, the blue that is defined as in Blue Monday, but this is achievement, meaning we've managed to create assets that will help in the long run in the recovery of our business, because that helps us to derive revenue in the process. You can see that there were some anomalies in the process, but however, we responded well to those. And in 2021, that assisted in us assetting the company by coming up with infrastructure that is now used, capitalized, and attached for operational use. And even the problematic projects, there were some good movements in the process with the responses that we've put in place. And overall, just to give you a picture of how the company performed overall, because that affects the BSC, the corporate performance of the company. That talks to CapEx commitment, cash flow, and capitalization. As you can see, it's all green, meaning we did achieve the targets, and those are all the programs on your right, projects rather on your right, that we managed to achieve, and that assisted in creating assets that will derive us revenue in the long run. However, this is going to be the impact going forward. You can see the blue in this particular instance is not so good, because those are the programs that should have been contracted maybe last year or the year before, but due to COVID and budgeting exercise and reprioritization and so forth, this is the impact. We haven't contracted those, which means after a while we will feel the pinch of that, because our asset base, as much as it is good in the books, but if we were to retain the status quo and not do any project, which is what the graph is showing here, for the next 15 years or so, we would have fully depleted our assets, which means we are inviting interesting topics as to why then we would need to charge our counterparts with the tariffs if we don't have assets. That means we'd be left with buildings, because buildings, they take 15 years to depreciate, whereas the CNS equipment, some take 10 years, and some take 15 years, especially the surveillance ones. So which means we need to strike a good balance when it comes to, reprioritization and so forth. And also thinking in the future, what else are we going to be involved in technologies that are going to assist us, to fill in the gap in terms of the product diversification of products and so forth, so that we can continue to survive. Because if we don't do that, we'll be equal to a person sitting by the road selling expired products and hoping that that business can be sustained. So we need to find that nice balance as we move forward. So yeah, this is where my sermon ends for now. I hope that I've given you an account of what has been our experience during COVID and what has been our results, and what lessons we can derive from that. And the recommendation is that we continue to find a balance, and also not to forget about the future, because sitting and doing nothing, it's equivalent to eating today and waiting for death to come tomorrow. So, and then we become redundant. So that is the message today, and I believe that is where my sermon will end for today. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you did benefit as I benefited. Thank you very much. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kulekani Ngobo, for that very insightful presentation. Very well presented as well. I mean, you mentioned a whole lot of things on how you responded to the pandemic of the COVID-19 with delivery or implementation of very important projects and programs within the organization for us to meet our services of delivering safety, air traffic management, and air traffic services. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I think you've already covered most of the questions that are posed on the negatives and the positives that were brought by the pandemic? What impact did they have in your environment of logistics and project implementation? And also, you mentioned reprioritization of CAPEX projects in response to the pandemic that we had to do as a business. So I'll just ask one question in the interest of time. Our time is well spent. And I think you already responded to what measures had to be put in place that were necessary and procedures for us to conform to the COVID-19 precautions, things like social distancing, and we were no longer traveling. You had to do everything remotely, most of the things remotely, until the lockdowns were eased. So the one question that I would like to pose, which will probably have a very short answer from you, is that how did you meet the regulations, the regulatory compliance, and the SLAs within your environments? Did you meet them? Did you not meet them? And how? I think it's going to be a very short response. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Yeah, we did try, even though not 100%, because, when we're dealing with projects, you have to come into close proximity of each other. But what we played with was time. So maybe, for example, when it comes to training, OJTI, other group will start in the morning, 4 people, and then others will then take over during the day, and then the rest will join in the afternoon, as opposed to having a crowd in one site. And then when it comes to the service level agreements, we did meet them because we're talking to navigation, right? I'm hoping that's the question, the availability ratios. So that one, obviously, Boitumelo did cover when it comes to how we responded to ensuring that the availability of the equipment is there when it comes to navigation, surveillance, and communication. I'm hoping that I covered your question sufficiently.
Yes, certainly you did cover. Well, from my side, I would like to thank you very much for that presentation. And that brings us to the end of this session, ladies and gentlemen. From my side, I would like to end with this quote that says, once you have climbed a great hill, you discover that there's many other more hills to climb. I think that's what COVID-19 pandemic poses to all of us as the industry. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Very much, Lisa. Thank you very much, and to the formidable team that you spearheaded on the topic about the impact of COVID-19 on the ATSEP environment. The team has indeed significantly exceeded the expectations, and I will certainly remind your line managers when we come to performance reviews that indeed you delivered on the KPI. The team touched on a pertinent topic that the globe is still grappling with. The deadly pandemic that has managed to turn our lives upside down. As enigmatic as it appears or look, we certainly cannot afford to succumb to self-despair. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been reliably informed once again that our moderator on the session on ATSEP licensing has completed his warm-ups, and I'm not surprised as he's famously known for being a runner of a comrade marathon. Therefore, warming up remains the prevailing custom for him. He spends 40 hours of the week contributing to the industry as a manager responsible for ATSEP training at the ATNS Aviation Training Academy. I'm not going to steal his limelight and pronounce on what he has in store for us. He has, in fact, better equipped to discharge that responsibility. Before maybe I call him on stage, I've got an appointment with our participants that will conclude this session at 2:30, the entire masterclass. And I intend sticking to that. 2:30, we should be able to wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator on the topic of ATSEP licensing, Mr. Sibusiso Habile.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Indeed, we have warmed up and now we are ready to pick up the pace. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this segment of the event that is themed the importance of ATSEP. On this segment, we will discuss ATSEP licensing with a specific focus on 2 areas, the pros and cons in implementing ATSEP license and regulation, as well as the regulatory perspective on ATSEP licensing. To help us unpack we have 2 very experienced speakers in air traffic management who will take us through their presentation, and thereafter we will have a brief Q&A session in the interest of time, So I do invite you to pay attention to the presentation and send through your questions and comment on the chat facility. Ladies and gentlemen, on regulatory perspective on ATSEP licensing, allow me to introduce to you our speaker, Phumuzo Mapeto. She has over 10 years experience in the aviation sector, serving as an air traffic controller at ATNS, in that time as an aerodrome controller at ATCO 01 level, and then as an approach procedural controller at ATCO 2. In all this, she was providing a safe and expeditious solution for traffic, both in controlled and uncontrolled airspace. She worked with different airports, serving different air traffic service operations, positions, and also providing training to fellow industry colleagues as a grade 1 instructor. Phumuzo joined the South African Civil Aviation Authority during the year 2019 as a personnel licensing inspector for aviation training organizations that are providing air traffic service training. This position includes tasks such as handling all the training-related queries, audits, inspections, and other licensing matters from the ATS industry. She prides herself in ethical conduct, professionalism, applying dedication to her work, and is prepared to serve the industry to her utmost best. She is a civil servant who holds multiple certificates and qualifications that weigh in to help her to perform her duties to serve the CAA and industry with continued professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Phumuzo Mapeto to the platform for her presentation. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, depending on the time zone. Thank you so much, Program Director. I am deeply humbled to be part of such a historical event, and I always cherish to be part of this. Distinguished speakers who are well experts in their field, and once again, congratulations to the anniversary of the ATSEP community. It's such a very great honor to be part of this today. Your work is noted all around the world, and I hope to learn more from this masterclass. And to the SA ATSEP team, ATNS and SACA, thank you for this great opportunity. I will be flighting my presentation shortly. As I have been introduced, my name is Phumuzo Mapeto. I am a panel inspector for ATS training, dealing with aviation training organizations providing the air traffic control training. So today, my presentation, I am hoping to bring out clarity to where, as the CAA, we sit when it comes to licensing of the ATSEP, and also to remind everyone that the critical role that they play in the aviation safety chain. And my topic now speaks to the regulatory perspective on the licensing of ATSEP. First slide is a scope of what my presentation will be covering. I'll be talking about the introduction to licensing the aviation personnel, the documents governing the personnel licensing, which are including but not limited to Annex 1, Annex 10, and document 157. The third point will be about the SACA perspective to licensing ATSEP, pros and cons, and the duration of creating a new regulation. Without wasting time, the aim of this presentation, as I've mentioned, to provide clarity on the importance of licensing of all aviation professionals within the industry. Our industry is a community of individuals who work together directly and indirectly to provide the safe and expeditious flow of traffic, and also to provide safety to our passengers and equipment used to achieve these results. The equipment doesn't only limit to aircrafts and towers or radar halls, but it also stretches out to our communication, navigation, and system maintenance that make our work easier. This is where our ATSEP community steps in, because they provide a safety critical service to all phases of air navigation. On the screen, we've got two documents. The first one in blue is the personal licensing Annex 1. And then on your right, in orange, we've got the document 157, which is the SAPS that works with the supervision of the oversight of ATSEP. There is currently no provision under ICAO Annex 1 for the licensing of ATSEP. However, there has been an increased need to oversight the training of them This is where the competency-based training has become more intense, and they work under supervision to provide a more detailed understanding of the environment they work in. And this is found in the ICAO Annex 10 and document 157. Gentlemen, what you see on the screen now is a few pointers on how the ATSEP can receive certification. And on the right, before I get into these points, I've listed loss of communication because as an air traffic controller before, the loss of communication was a very, most unwelcoming situation. I remember when I was working at Lanseria with a colleague of mine, I was ground and she was tower. And as she was controlling, there was traffic inbound. She could not hear the pilot could not hear her. And we tried testing all sorts of, our backup radios to see what's happening. And we couldn't get it right. The first thought was to call the techs. We call them the techs. I'm not sure if it's an informal or a formal word that's used in our industry, but we thought, you know what, we need the techs right now to come help us. That's where we realized that they do play a very important role in our chain. And without them, really, we can't have, like Dr. Malinga mentioned in the beginning, you can't stand at the tower window and call Come 457, can you hear me? Or Springbok or whoever. So this is where we realize the certification of these personnel is really important. It has been identified recently of a more formal recognition of the importance of ATSEP in delivering safety and their position in the safety chain. Hence now, the importance of competency-based training and certification will be either done in 3 ways. The first one currently is not happening in South Africa, licensing from the relevant authority. But what happens is that the CNS oversees the training and the maintenance of the system at the NSP. The second one speaks of the certification from the air navigation services provider. Formal recognition of the importance of ATSEP in delivering safety that they and their position in the safety by the academy, and then hence now the importance of work on the system-based training and certification will be either done and oversight in 3 ways done to make sure that the first one really currently is not happening in South Africa in our very complex industry. The third point speaks about a diploma or a degree from a certified college or university. So now this certification, you will supplement with the training from the NSP to be certified to work on our machines. And thereafter, the ATSEPs will be working under supervision in line with the requirements from the orange document that I've shown you in the previous slide. On the screen now, you have several disadvantages and advantages that I could think of alongside my team. The first one, the advantages of having the ATSEP's license and working in-house all the way is that the finance expansion, where all the qualifications and expertise will be kept in-house to avoid a lot of outsourcing. And then it will also reduce risks because now you'll be certified according to your experience. So now we know that if a certain system fails, we know who to send at that point without actually waiting to outsource information. And then there'll also be a clear training and progression for the ATSEP towards certification and licensing. So we'll be able to distinguish between who's junior and who's senior. The disadvantages now, it causes a lot of limitations to staff because of the type of scope that they can cover. So if you're not certified on a specific product, you can't work on it, or a system, you can't. So limitations will kick in there. And then it will also take longer to validate on a certain system. For example, now when COVID kicked in, there were not so many aircrafts flying. So now you'll be taking forever to validate on that system because it's not being used as it was before. And then progression could be slow. And then with the rapid change in technology as well. So the disadvantages kicks in there now. The technology is changing, but there are no aircrafts flying in and out. Ladies and gentlemen, we are reaching the end of the presentation. As we unwind down the talk at the beginning of the presentation, I did mention that my purpose here today is to give a brief regulatory perspective on the licensing of ATSEP. Right now, again, to highlight, you do play an important role in our safety value chain, be it in communication and navigation and also the system maintenance. The personnel licensing team alongside our management will always be ready to assume these duties into creating regulations and implementing them as soon as the ICAO issues out SAPs to include in the Annexure 1. Right now, we are not developing any licensing towards the ATSEP, as mentioned above, that it doesn't make provision in Annexure 1. The implementation, however, takes about 18 to 24 months to be issued and applied. The SACA does, I highlight again, understand the importance of ATSEP in the value chain of aviation and the role they play to keep the skies safe. For any more information with licensing, please do copy the email address that appears on the screen. If you want to share any information or find out any further more information, please do get in touch with us. And I do promise that we will follow up to your request as much as we can. Thank you so much for your time, for everybody. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Program Director, thank you.
Thank you very much, Omotso, for that insightful presentation on the issue of ATSEP licensing. Dear colleagues, in the absence of my second speaker, as I'm getting confirmation from our producer due to technical challenges, I will go straight to questions with Omotso. I do have a few questions that I would like to maybe pose to you within this topic of ATSEP licensing. So the very first one, I would like to refer back to Dr. Malinga's opening address. He mentioned that due to what is happening in the world around, we are at a situation where we have to extend the lifespan of some of our systems. That on its own, it emphasizes the nature of mission critical work that the ATSEPs do. So in your presentation, you highlighted that currently the ATSEP licensing is not yet included on Annex 1, which is indeed true. So given that opening statement and what we know that currently ATSEP licensing is not part of Annex 1, to what extent does this enable the regulator, the CAA, to perform its oversight duties on ATSEP activities?
So, sure if it's my mic, but say again the last part of the question.
Okay. The question is, we know that ATSEP licensing is not yet part of Annex 1. Mm-hmm. Therefore, with that being the case, to what extent does this allow then the regulator to perform oversight on ATSEP activities?
Okay, thank you for that question. I think we do understand that at the South African Civil Aviation Authority, we take it upon ourselves to make sure that all systems are safe and they provide safety for our passengers and equipment, as I have mentioned. So to the extent when it will come from the CNS department, they do make sure that they follow up on system maintenance and the durability of the systems. So I do not have more information on that part, but I do promise that all inspections and maintenance and oversight that is being done at the Civil Aviation Authority is of great excellence and to make sure that systems are maintained at the 100% level that they should be operating at.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And maybe the second question I would like us to look at is, in the event that we do license for ATSEPs, in your view, what will work best? Licensing per system at a location, or licensing per system with reference to site? Or let me put it in a different way. Let's take a VOR. Which one will work best? Licensing for a VOR. It doesn't matter if the VOR is based in Johannesburg, if it's based in Cape Town or Durban, or going with a model where we license, if we license for a VOR, we're only licensing for a VOR that is in Johannesburg. When you go to a VOR in Durban, you will need to get a separate license for that. So in your view, from the personal licensing perspective, what do you think will work best, given the nature of ATSEP work?
That's a very interesting question, because now it will go back to us as air traffic controllers. If you get licensed as an ATSEP, you get licensed to be maintaining on communication and navigation. Then if you are based at a certain station, you should validate at that station to be licensed to work at that station. And if you are transferred, say, from Cape Town to Johannesburg, then you'll have to do a whole new training for Johannesburg to be added onto your licensing. So it will be, the rating will be a generic rating, but your license to work at a station will be specified based on the training received at that particular station. Yes.
Understood. Thank you. And indeed, these are some of the things that, as the conversation for ATSEP licensing unfolds, will need to be considered as we move forward.
True.
And my very last question to you, again, from the regulatory perspective, you know, in the fast-changing world that we are living in now, how agile are the regulations, you know, to keep up with the new technology and the provision for new technology? I'm posing this because, again, going to your presentation, you mentioned that a time frame of between 18 and 24 months to develop new regulations and new standard. But if you mirror that against the pace at which new technology is coming in and all of that, how agile are our regulations in adapting to that pace and to that speed?
Mr. So at this moment, what happens is that ATSEP already has a baseline of what's happening. So from my understanding, I feel that as soon as, say, for instance, the ATSEP are included in the Annexure 1, we already have something that we are working on. So we just need to pick up from what's currently available and make it work. So it might even take a shorter period from 18 to 24 months. That's just a generic answer or more general answer to give to the public. But we already have something that we are working on top of as the ATSEP community. So civil aviation will probably look at what's available right now and try and work on it and see what loopholes are available that we should fill in order to move forward from that. So I believe that the system, or rather the regulation implementation, could take a shorter period of time, since, well, we do have SAPs available and that ICAO document 157 that helps us to oversight. So it could actually give us a more inline state to work towards it. Yes.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that. And Khomotso, thank you very much for your presentation and for giving us the regulatory perspective on ATSEP licensing. Dear colleagues, I will close this session at this point. But before I hand over to the program director, let me just apologize for not having our second speaker ready. And let me also just maybe mention that the conversation on ATSEP licensing is still a long one. It's still a very important one and a very interesting one. And we need all stakeholders on board and to bring in all the possible scenarios and possible ideas so that when that time comes, we already have our ducks in a row. With that said, I will hand back to the program director. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sibusiso and Khomotso from our regulator for the excellent conversation on ATSEP licensing. Indeed, that's one of the conversations that should be ongoing, and all the relevant stakeholders should be coming on board and have this conversation and pave a way forward on what will work for our industry, zooming into the South African context. And beautiful questions really raised when you were embarking on a Q&A session, and then those questions I would like to believe most of them they were eloquently responded to by Khomotso. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think let me now introduce you to the next moderator who will be spearheading conversation on future ATSEP requirements. This topic is equally important and integral to our theme today. The moderator for this session is an aviation safety fanatic within ATNS. He applied his trade as a technical standards specialist in the safety standards and regulations in the office of the ATNS CEO. He also serves as the SATSIPA Vice President Operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Gurulego Ntombela will be spearheading the next conversation on the ATSEP future requirement. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, former President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Dr. Malinga, distinguished guest, Vice President Ifatsia. We are blessed to have you in this session. Colleagues, this is the exciting session I think we all have been waiting for. Please sit back and relax as I'll be introducing our speakers that will be taking us through the session. The first speaker that will be taking us through the importance of communication within the ATSEPs is no other than Phumelele Nomcholongwana. They call him Phumi. He's currently employed in ATNS as an engineering technician, which is at ATSEP. Has been with ATNS since 2002. Is part of the furniture right now. He serves also as a SATSIPA Vice President Strategy. Over the years, Phumi has collected several innovation awards, including AviAfrica Innovation Award, the South African Institution of Electrical Engineers National Award. Although he's adamant, according to him, that he's not an academic, believe me, this guy is an academic. He's purely driven by his quest for practicable solutions to real-life problems. According to Phumelele, for a number of unspecified reasons, his research interest has migrated from hardcore technological and mechanical innovation towards the social science, where his research interests span wide and far from aviation safety, safety culture, perception studies, futurology, with a specific focus on air traffic, on ATSEPs. Dear colleagues, amongst the CNS qualifications and the numerous short courses qualifications that Phumelele holds, he also holds a diploma in electrical engineering, project management, safety management in civil aviation with distinction, and civil aviation management with distinction. He further has degrees in electrical engineering, business administration, BSc honors in technology management with distinction. So you can tell that we have the master of all trades here, and MSc in technology management with distinction also. Help me to welcome Mr. Phumelele. Phumelele, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ntombela, and good afternoon to fellow ATSEPs and aviators at large. Today's topic is the importance of communication in the ATSEP environment. It's a topic that could practically take the whole day, but we'll try and crunch it within the next 10 minutes, give us a take. What we'll be looking at what is communication, why communication fails, when does communication fail, what actually happens when communication fails. We'll look at communication within the ATSEP environment. We'll look at how we can improve communication, and we'll have a look at the future of communication in the ATSEP environment, and that will take us to our conclusion. Now, communication is rather very broad and can be very ambiguous if we look at it, because you get electronic communication, digital communication, you can get vertical communication, horizontal communication, verbal, non-verbal, whatsoever. But what we'll be focusing on is interhuman or interpersonal communication. Now, communication, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, everything we do or we do not do communicates a message to the audience. If we look at Communication 101, we'll know that for communication to occur, we need a sender, a message, a medium, and a receiver. But this is just a process of communication, and in no way does it imply that effective communication has occurred. For effective communication to occur, we need the received message to arrive and be interpreted in the manner in which the sender intended it to. I'll give you an example of such. There's a story reported on the NASA Aviation Safety Report System. I think it was actually it was 295 of 2004, issue 295, where upon takeoff, the cabin attendant noticed that the flight deck door had opened. Now she called the pilot to inform him of the door, but what she said was, turn around. And the captain, instead of looking behind him to see the door being open as the flight attendant had expected him, he banged the aircraft and turned back to base, to the airport. That's a classic example of ineffective communication. Although communication occurred, but the message didn't arrive in the manner in which it was intended. Now, we're very familiar with the relationship between aviation accidents and the human factor. But when we look more deeply, most of the accidents that are attributed to human factor actually boils down to communication failure or miscommunication. For example, if we look at some of these, the Tenerife airport accidents that took about 583 lives, Avianca Flight 52, American Airlines Flight 965, Turkey Dadri mid-air collision in 1996, the Linate airport disaster. These are just some of those where communication or miscommunication was a major contributor to the accidents. Now, why does communication fail? One of the interesting thing, or one of the common flaws in our understanding of communication, is that we tend to think that communication is synonymous with effective communication. Just because we've communicated something, we then think that the other party has received it in the manner in which we had intended it. But unfortunately, there are a number of issues or number of barriers that can hinder effective communication. For example, language. And this is one of the accidents. The pilots, the crew didn't properly understand English. We get also terminology, people using big words or using a terminology that is from a certain environment. We get acronyms as well that can be very ambiguous depending where you use them. We get cultural differences that hinder communication. And we know that culture informs the decision you make when communicating with others. And in South Africa, most of us will understand when I say, I'm sure you know what I mean. Sure, in most African languages means I doubt what I'm saying. Knowledge deficiency or incongruent expectations. When one party is expecting the other one to be familiar with a certain concept of procedure, we take for granted that by now he should know what I mean by MCS or DBG. You can also, unfortunately, over-communication, under-communication, or inconsistent communication can be a big hindrance to operate. We get power struggles as well that become a big issue. When people start hoarding knowledge and information due to psychological, emotional, or job insecurities. These all affect our effective communication processes. Now, within the ATSEP environment, as ATSEP, we communicate with a number of stakeholders. We communicate within the team amongst each other. We communicate with ATSEPs at different centers, different regions, different countries. Sometimes we communicate with air traffic controllers, with the fault reporting center, with third parties, the suppliers, the original equipment manufacturers, or service providers, and so forth. And for us to have an effective communication with these stakeholders is paramount to providing and maintaining a critical link in the aviation safety chain. Because what happens when this communication breaks, it unfortunately affects our availability. The impact of miscommunication or on CNS equipment, restoration time is in fact very serious. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through that, but some of us might be familiar with the Swiss cheese model or the causation chain, accident causation chain model. We understand that the impact of having non-availability of CNS equipment can have catastrophic events to aviation safety. Let me give you an example of two incidents. A couple of years ago, in South Africa, there's a small airport in the Western Cape province. It's called George Airport. Now, I sit in Bloemfontein, and from Bloemfontein, that's central South Africa, in the Free State, we manage the Kimberley Airport, which is in the Northern Cape. A couple of years ago, we had an ATC by the name of George operating from Kimberley Airport. He had his VOR unserviceable. He reported the VOR to the fault reporting center. And in his report, he said, "This is George. I would like to report Kilo Yankee Victor unserviceable." The fault reporting center reported the fault to George technicians, George ATSEP, sitting in the George airport. It was only hours later when they found out there was nothing wrong with their equipment that they realized that this fault should have been reported to Bloemfontein. So that, in fact, unnecessarily impacted on the restoration time of that particular equipment. I'll give you a typical, another example where communication fails and it impacts us negatively in terms of our availability. We have, in Durban, for example, we have a DVOR that's in KwaZulu-Natal province in the eastern side of South Africa. We've got a DVOR that fails. The technicians take about 2 days to get to the problem, and they take about 30 minutes to actually resolve the problem. In the process of them getting to the problem, they devise a methodology that could actually get them troubleshoot or find the problem within an hour. But there's no process on how this information or how this new methodology or procedure can be communicated with other ATSEPs nationwide or internationally. 6 months down the line, a similar fault occurs in East London, that's in the Eastern Cape. The technicians, the ATSEPs there, they take 2.5 to 3 days to find the problem. A problem that could have been solved within 2 hours had they known about the procedure developed by the Durban ATSEPs. That, unfortunately, this is a typical examples where we lose communication amongst each other, and it affects our availability, which inevitably affects our aviation safety chain. Excuse me. So how can we improve communication? We need to identify the communication barriers, and we can do this through workshops and surveys, and this is quite often at the organizational level. We need to adopt an open and honest communication culture as one of the defining elements of a safety culture. You know, we find quite a number of elements on safety culture, but communication is not one of them. I know some might argue that informed culture falls under that, but we can argue differently on another day on that one. Communication is different than just informing people. We need to avoid promoting risky rewards, discourage behavior that thwarts communication. Now, coming more to a personal level on ATSEPs, we need to regularly check in with our colleagues, establish and solidify the relationships we have with each other and we have with ATCs. We need to understand ATC operations. You know, the problem is we get instances where we do not understand what the ATC is trying to communicate to us. He says, "I've got a ghost target on my screen, and we want to go call in the closest Catholic pastor to come pray for the ghost in the screen." We need to identify a common goal as ATSEPs and strive towards it. We cannot be all chasing in different directions. We need to come together as a team, as a region, as a nation. We need to find a unified, a common goal that we can all work towards. We need to acknowledge and appreciate constructive efforts by each other. Do not assume that the other party is aware of certain things. We need to collate and share knowledge and information. Classical example I've made with Durban and East London example. So how is the future looking for ATSEPs? Soon, and this is not the so distant future, we'll be looking at centralized databases where ATSEP-related information can easily be stored and accessed. The ATSEP will provide a symptom, and the system will produce possible causes as well as live comments from ATSEPs nationally and even internationally. So to an extent, you can stand in front of the equipment and take a picture of the symptoms or a picture of what you are seeing, and there'll be the AI system that's will be running this database can work out and say, these are the challenges, this is probably what you're looking at. Soon we'll be having automatic logging of faults, where the systems, CNS systems will log themselves as faulty and create a job card automatically. This will avoid having incorrect logging of faults, where this is a challenge in two folds. One, you get the system being logged at the wrong time. Two, you get the system being logged incorrectly in terms of the fault description. Whether the system is downgraded or is completely off, this becomes a problem, and this will sort of resolve such. We'll get automatic fault status updates. Systems will automatically update their fault status when they come online. We'll have AI interventions, where AI systems will monitor the performance of CNS equipment nationwide and generate suggestions around implementation of maintenance models and logistic support plans, as well as I've mentioned, diagnostics on the systems. And like I said, this is not a too distant future. In conclusion, improving ATSEP communication will undoubtedly have a positive impact on CNS equipment availability. And this is this is the link that we close on the value chain as far as aviation safety is concerned. As ATSEPs, we need to understand the critical role that we play in the aviation safety chain. And I will repeat that, please. As ATSEPs, we need to understand the critical role we play in the aviation safety chain. I will leave it at that. When we understand it, then we need to help others understand and appreciate it. Only through communication can all this be achieved. Thank you, fellow aviators.
Thank you, Phumelele, for a great presentation. Indeed, communication is key to a successful aviation. As the classic examples that you have made about George, reporting George, that was very interesting. I have a few questions for you. The first question is, you spoke about the power struggle. And the question is, what are the psychological impacts introduced by the power struggle that you spoke about when it comes to ATSEPs?
It's something that we take lightly and we take for granted. And unfortunately, there is the one aspect which is emotional and psychological is something that I'll need my friends from the psychological department or human factors side to come and assist on that one. It's not something that I can probably go at length with in responding to that. Job insecurities is something that I can talk to, especially within the South African environment, where there's been a view or a perception that transformation is imposed to get rid of certain people. That then, unfortunately, it then allows or forces other people to go into a defense mechanism and hoard information so that it makes them irreplaceable. I don't know if you follow me. So that is within that context. Like I said, the emotional part, there's also people that on the emotional and just by hoarding information and thinking that I'm the only one who has this information, they translate that to be power. So they feel powerful by keeping information, unfortunately, at the detriment of the team, at the detriment and compromising aviation safety. And those are the things that we take for granted. And I would probably suggest that we take a magnifying glass and look at those aspects. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Colleagues, as I told you, we're having a robust discussion here. The next question then I'll address to you, Mr. Nomjulongana, is what do you think are the barriers or current barriers when it comes to ATSEP's communication? You mentioned the number of communications that they need to be able to fulfill in order for them to conduct their job properly. So I want to, in your analysis, what do you think are the barriers and what can be done to improve or actually to address those barriers?
Thank you, Zen. Good question. If you look at ATSEPs by nature, and probably some people will disagree, but generally, we're not very social entities. We prefer dealing with our equipment and moving out and writing our little report. And even with that, we want to have it as short as possible and get it out of the way. We enjoy our time with the equipment, we enjoy chasing fault, we enjoy fixing fault. Now, when it comes to the human aspect, that becomes a bit of a challenge. And if we talk about communication, that is where we need to improve on, because we need to engage with each other. And what lacks then in this regard is a platform that promotes that enables that engagement within the ATSEP. The classical example I made with Durban and East London, we need a platform that would facilitate such sharing of information or sharing of knowledge. A platform that would facilitate the engagement, the communications between teams, even within the center. Because you'll find that it becomes even sometimes to engage because there's no human aspect or social aspect that was in equipment. And that social cohesion, especially under the COVID situation, actually start disintegrating even worse. And that hinders communication in the bigger space. Thanks.
Thank you, Phumelele. And the last question, I think now is about time I move away from the human communication and go to systems communication. You spoke about introducing the automation when it comes to reporting of the faults. How do you see that taking off?
Interestingly enough, it's one of the projects that I'm currently, I don't know if maybe it's on the right platform, but I'm involved with the R&D department. It's something, like I said, that is not in the so distant future. The technology is already there. The question is, do we want to adopt it or not? Again, we need to work with the human factor, sorry to go to that side, because we are the one who enters into a fear environment that when we allow systems to talk to each other, they inevitably will replace us. I can imagine some of my FRC colleagues listening to this and me saying the systems will report directly to the technician. What is the fault? It will create a job cut. Then the question they will ask is, where does that leave me as the fault reporting center agent? So those are the fears that we need to deal, and that what holds us back with aviation, especially insofar as innovations are concerned in the aviation environment. We tend to be stuck in the Stone Age, and we tend to live with the mentality that certain innovations need to be thoroughly developed before they come to aviation. We've passed that stage. We need to adopt, we need to move with the changes, and otherwise we'll be left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for that robust discussion. And I hope our viewers and the audience enjoyed that session for your hard work and the great presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, with that said, I will be moving on to our special guest. We are blessed as South African ATSEP Association to in our midst the one and only IFATSEA Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I would like you to switch on your camera. We are blessed to have you. His name is Theodore Kiritsisi. He's the Vice President of IFATSEA. He holds an electronic, is a senior electronic engineer employed by HCAA. HCAA, those that do not know, it's Hellenic Civil Aviation Authority from Greece. He holds a BSc in electronic engineering with commendation. That means award given for very good performance. As I told you that we are blessed to have him around here. Mr. Theo, he is also a strategic committee for IFATSIA. He's part of the Censa 2020, was part of the Censa 2020 IFATSIA Europe strategic, as a strategic advisor. He coordinates IFATSIA Censa activities since 2005 to 2012. He contributed to the production of ICAO training manual for ATSEPs, as we are referring to it today. We are blessed to have someone who was there when that manual was drafted. He was a project manager of IFATSIA ATSEP safety study. He participated and presented in international forums such as Eurocontrol, Flight Safety Foundation, European Commission, European Civil Aviation Conference for Security Issues, and he chaired events in the international conference and the workshop. He's an editor of Navier, the IFATSIA Journal, a magazine focusing on CNS and ATM systems and human factors. Role in the HCAA, he's responsible for oversight and certifications of CNS service provision. In his experience, he's experienced in the CNS systems, the data processing systems, and the automated area control centers. He also specializes in state-of-art aviation security systems, access control, trace detection, and X-ray technologies. He's a member of NSA Sensor Deployment Working Group. Guests and colleagues, the distinguished guest that we have here, he also has published a number of papers. I might not be able to go through all of them for the sake of time, but you are welcome to follow him on LinkedIn as I am, and I experience a lot of I actually gain a lot of information and knowledge through his publications and also his post. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be handing over to Theo. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, and happy International ATSEP Day. What I will try to share with you is my presentation, but my laptop does not fully agree. Hope you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, sir, you can go ahead, you can see it. If you can just put it on presentation mode.
Yes, I have done so. Thank you very much. Please interrupt me if something is going wrong. What I'm going to talk to you about is about the change that is imminent. In the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot of changes with new systems, models of operation and approaches, as well as new entrants. So I have taken in my presentation an approach that is a little bit simplistic, but it gets intense towards the end. But I try to have a down-to-earth presentation about the questions that we all ask ourselves or the experts. So we hear about keywords and new concepts of research and development, digitalization, cloud technologies and distributed architectures, virtual towers, that is remote towers, artificial intelligence, a new goodie that's coming with initiatives in Europe, that of the ATM data service provider, the virtual centers, those two go together, and the issue of cybersecurity. And the question we all ask is, what are they really about? How close are they to implementation? and what is the impact on the ATSEP tasks, roles, and responsibilities. To answer how close they are, you may consider some of these concepts to be in operation by 2030 or a little bit earlier. So let's hope that the computer will cooperate. Yes. So allow me to take a notion a little bit like Pumelele approached the issues earlier. It's been said that whatever you put your attention on will grow in your perception and become the prevailing issue. And this is the focus on the final projects. Whereas the CNS and ATM ICAO notion is a forgotten notion. Nobody talks about CNS and ATM anymore. Everybody talks about ATM and they mean ATC and the end service delivered to the pilots. So for ATS to be delivered, a whole network, as you know, of CNS and ATM systems, including the flight inspection activities, are crucial enablers to the ultimate service delivery to the pilot. Please remember that navigation is delivered directly to the pilot without the
Colleagues, it seems like we might have lost our speaker. We'll just try and connect with him again. Just give us a few minutes as our technical team is working hard on the background to try and get our distinguished guest back. Apologies again, colleagues. Still trying to get our guest back in the background. If you can just be patient with us. Thank you. While we're waiting for our guest, Pumelele, can you please join me back on the podium? Maybe we can finalize some of the questions and assist us in some of the questions that were under this topic. Thank you, sir. While you're waiting for Theo to come back, I'm not sure, maybe they're also experiencing load shedding in Greece, as it usually happens with us. But we're just gonna give him some few minutes. Under the topic of the future ATSEPs, Mr. Pumelele, we all know that the the aviation is moving towards cloud information sharing, cloud-based information sharing. And there are issues about cybersecurity that will come with that introduction. We can make an example in South Africa where we have the system, the VCS system, that in order for it to interconnect with all other airports from one airport to another, it's got capabilities of using the cloud as the connection. How then is the ATSEP aligned into ensuring the security of the data that will be transmitted through the cloud? How well are we prepared as South African ATSEP?
Thank you, Mr. Dombele. It's a very interesting question, and I don't necessarily, I don't know how to answer that, but in trying to attempting to answer it, there's two divisions. Our training does not necessarily go in depth insofar as cybersecurity is concerned as ATSEPs. We are very good with networking. We are good with communication, data communication, and so forth. But cybersecurity is a specialty service or career on its own. And until we understand that and we start integrating cybersecurity specialists as ATSEPs or evolving our training to focus on cybersecurity, we are actually leaving a very big hole in our service provision. I know there's the mention of integrating guys with other ATSEPs or ANSPs. They take the IT department and they integrate them with ATSEPs. And we have two departments that work together in collaboration in providing CNS equipment availability or services. The problem with that, and if it is lightly taken, is that when you have two departments working towards a similar goal, but having two centers of power, one reports to a different executive, one reports to a different executive, there tends to be conflicts at some point because the priorities might not be necessarily aligned. So if we decide, or any organization that decides to integrate, that is one thing that they need to take into consideration. How do they localize the power within these two departments? But my perspective would be to have either ATSEPs upskill ourselves to include cybersecurity, or we start recruiting from specialists on that side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phumelele. I'm gonna throw in our program director here. Apologies, program director, but I'm gonna throw you into this session while we're waiting for our speaker. When it comes to the ATO, South African ATO, what are the preparations that we are putting in place when it comes to incorporating cybersecurity in our training? That will be directed to Mr. Sam Mahlangu. If Sam is not available, Sbusi, so you can take it.
Please repeat the question, Kulego.
The question is, what are the measures that has been put in place by ATO, South African ATO, in addressing the issue of cybersecurity when it comes to training preparations?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hold that question. That answer there. You will come back. I think I will hand over again to my distinguished guest. I see that he managed to come back and join us. Over to you, Theo, and apologies, colleagues, for that glitch, technical glitch.
Sorry about that. I wasn't aware that. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, sir. You can go ahead.
Okay. Did you hear my slide about the cybersecurity challenge?
You are about to touch on that. I think you can start there.
All right. I will maximize it and start on it. So we're talking about the cybersecurity challenge. And as I said, let's take an example. When discussing the issue of cybersecurity in international organizations and fora, ask the following question. Think of a cybersecurity scenario and please describe your opinion of who and how is going to address it. In my experience, in 9 out of 10 cases, the scenario will be of IT nature and the personnel attending to it will be IT staff addressing the virus or an attack. But we are talking about CNS and ATM systems where only ATSEP are authorized to deal with. And attacks can be of hybrid nature. It can be on the network, but also on the signal in space, let's say jamming, spoofing, etc., combined. So shouldn't the ATSEP of the future be trained and competent for this task? Are we doing well?
Yes, you're still doing well. You can go ahead.
Thank you. It seems new concepts and business models. We're talking about digitalization, automation, AI, etc. From current research, there is a tendency, according to the equivalent level of automation with regard to the human operator role, to use machine learning and artificial intelligence in general that will be running in the new generation of CNS and ATM systems. But the ATSEP will be attending those systems in real time and will be required to address the degradation or failure. Note, restarting an application running with the machine learning integrated will not restart a clean, fresh process as it's done today, but we will be using the learned data as basis. In case where there is a need for incident reconstruction for evaluation, there will be a need to evaluate the algorithm performance. In Europe, there is discussion as we speak about certification of AI algorithms. So shouldn't the ATSEP of the future be trained and competent for this task? We know about remote towers, cloud technology, virtual centers, etc. Remote towers are highly intense technological solutions for optimization of the distribution of ATCO service availability to one or several airports. However, the ATSEP on-site issue to ensure CNS and ATM and support systems like cameras, microphones, etc., continuity of service delivery has been overlooked. IFATSIA has intervened in several projects to include an ATSEP working position for system monitoring and control. They designed the system in the early days. They created a product with no SMC. Cloud technology. The tendency of our times is not to use proprietary systems for data processing, but install the applications on the cloud. However, the notion of the ATSEP working position has not been studied yet. In this case, the system running on the cloud, the ATSEP will be sitting in front of a control position, and he will be monitoring and controlling, he or she will be monitoring and controlling the application that's running somewhere else. This has not been addressed yet. This has to be harmonized. Moreover, tools and applications have not been thought of yet for the ATSEP working position, and we consider this a risk and a showstopper not identified or studied yet for the new technologies to be implemented. If you visit our European site, you will see that there is a document uploaded in the atsep.eu website with Kostas Christoforou about the future role of the ATSEP. This is done under the auspices of the European Commission within a body called the European Group for Human Dimension, the abbreviation that you see there. And it's public. You can take it and see where the things are going for Europe. So again, the question comes up. Shouldn't the ATSEP of the future be trained and competent for these demanding tasks and concepts, artificial intelligence, automation, etc., etc.? And I'm not talking only technically, but also in terms of culture. We're talking about virtual centers and ATM data service providers. This is a European issue. Virtual centers are a European concept where air traffic services is delivered by the ATS rooms that are geographically separated from the ATM data processing systems, mainly FTP, but can also include RDP or other information, aeronautical ATM information and aeronautical information data fusion. There will be clients to ADSP's data. So the virtual centers will be, which will be an ACS room with no equipment next to it, just a router and some local processing, but a lot of working positions for the ATCOs, and of course technical supervision for the ATSEP. But the ADSP now will be, as I said, an FDP application with information integrated. That will create, in the end, what we call as the airspace picture for the ATSEP working, for the ATCO working position. New proposed regulation, the Single European Sky 2++, etc., that this will create a new market. Again, the question comes up, shouldn't the ATSEP of the future be trained and competent for these tasks? Are we doing well, Mr. Chairman?
We're doing well, Theo. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Just checking. Okay. So new concepts, ANS systems and business models. The success of these new concepts require that the ATSEP of the future have the background, starting from the entry qualifications, the training and syllabus, the culture, to address the new requirements stemming from the new concepts, the aviation environment, because in this new environment, the aircraft will be part of the network. New applications and notions, achieving thus the ultimate product delivery with safety being first and performance and efficiency following. The ICAO training manual and all related documents must proactively be adapted to the new training requirements for ATSEP. In Europe, where we have the European regulator EASA, produced a regulation for ATSEP with 110 pages of requirements for training, ATSEP training, but together with the cooperation of ANSPs and IFACEA, we managed to add an addendum of training for ATSEP with regard to cybersecurity. So the ATSEP for Europe at least are directly linked to the cybersecurity issues within the ENS system or the functional system, as we say in Europe. Meanwhile, new tools and applications will have to be researched and developed into mature final products to be able to ensure CNS and ATM systems service delivery. So when you procure your new systems in the future, and my recommendation, if you like, is my proposal is that you should think about having this new concept I'm describing here designed for your new center. FACEA is working in all regions to promote the importance of the ATSEP role for safety and ANS system delivery. These issues might appear to be a little bit futuristic, but in Europe, this discussion is ongoing every day in presentation. So in conclusion, the ATSEP of the future must be of sound background, highly trained in new technologies and concepts, and licensed like the other frontline actors listed in ICAO Annex 1. The ATSEP working position, new concept, must be analyzed in all possible instances. There will be a generic concept and an instance for CNS, ATM, whatever, relating to ATSEP tasks must be standardized and harmonized globally under the ICAO total system approach. ANSPs of the future will rely for their ANS services delivery on competent and licensed ATSEP as transversal enablers to the quality and service continuity of the future. All this while at the same time operating with a collaborative decision-making environment with the ATCOS, pilot, and national authorities. This issue of CDM might be a good idea for Pumele to work a little bit on. I think we have discussed this in the past. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theo, and apologies again, colleagues, for a little bit of glitch that we have experienced. Theo, I have a few questions for you, and the audience also has some few questions for you. The first one being the skill set required for future ATSEPs. What do you think are the skill sets that will be required for future ATSEPs?
This is a question that I've been trying to answer myself, because obviously that makes sense. I think that the entry qualification requirements will have to be of a technical college or a bachelor's degree, let's say, to say the least, in electronic engineering, and from there on IT also. The issue is that I don't have the answer effectively, but an effective answer, but also I think it is also related to the definition of the tasks that will be allocated to ATSEP while they're doing their jobs in the future. I'll give an example. When we have SWIM, the system-wide information network, having distributed system architecture will have an issue of cybersecurity. In European law and in ICAO, nobody else is allowed to touch the ANS equipment but the ATSEP. However, I think the work for the ATSEP will be the tactical role in addressing the mitigation of the problem that comes up with cybersecurity on strategically organized concepts and procedures earlier, and take the system offline and invite the IT experts on the IT part of it to resolve the problem, and the ATSEP will approve the correct operation after the resolution of the problem that can be done with a combined team of ATSEP and IT personnel or the local authority in some cases, and bring it back to operation under the certification or the approval of the ATSEP. So when we go now to artificial intelligence applications, I cannot, as a professional, ask the ATSEP to know it all, know the actual system operation, the sensor technologies, and also know of artificial intelligence. But there has to be some background in automation principles, reflecting now into training, and some ongoing or recurrent training as the new concepts are brought in on the issues of artificial intelligence. It took me long to answer your question without actually giving an answer, but just thoughts. Hope this satisfies your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well structured, Theo, and I understand the information that is required in order for you to be able to answer this question. Hence, it took long. Acceptable. The next question then, Theo, will be: what is the view of IFATSIA for a global harmonization of ATSEP's safety critical task on the global scale?
While we are celebrating 50 years in the history of IFATSIA, we are building on the same principles as our previous colleagues have done in the past. Remember, air traffic safety electronic personnel. Safety is in our title. This is the only profession that has safety built in their notion. We want ATSEP to offer their safety critical and safety related services with the highest standards. For this, we have initially worked with the ICAO on the training manual and competency-based training. This was the first training manual that came about for ATM personnel. The controllers and the pilots, the controllers only recently got their own. So we expect now that every ATSEP in the world, within a total quality system, total system approach, should be under the same qualification. And that qualification is no other than the licensing context of ICAO Annex 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo, for that answer. I believe that IFATSIA is working very close with ICAO on reviewing the Annex 1. I hope you can give us also the feedback on any updates, if there is any, from IFATSIA point of view, while you're giving us that update, and also just throw in one more question there. From the global scale point of view, what are the current challenges that are being experienced by the ATSEP due to COVID-19 on the global scale? Thank you.
Thank you. I have no fresh news from ICAO, but I have good news in the sense that IFATSIA has, since a few months ago, been granted an observer position in the Air Navigation Commission. Our president is attending to this, and also we have Pat Delaney, our ICAO rep, is also cleared to attend Air Navigation Commissions and fill in for the president when this is not possible. We hope that we strongly believe that our president will be back out there following his illness to fight for ATSEP interests. Allow me to take the COVID question in a different way. The COVID question was mentioned in my third slide with the mentioning of the flight inspection and the category of the airport connected to the availability of navaids or surveillance, if you like. It is taken for granted that systems are of very good quality nowadays, and they deliver the services. So the ATSEP is not in the picture. The fact that COVID-19 or no COVID-19, CNS services and systems and service availability is exactly the same as before, and that the fact that if the ATSEP are not doing their job, it has an impact, an economic impact, an impact on performance etc., is something that has risen, and I invite you to the public attention or to the specialist attention. That's why ICAO produced the state letter, and I would like you to use this argument whenever discussing about the importance of our profession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice President of IFATSIA. We are blessed to have you in our South African ATSEP Association Masterclass. And we've been blessed with information that we're going to have to go back, all of us, and digest on it and rework towards the better future for ATSEPs. With that said, I will then hand over to
Mr.
Okay.
Can I ask for a favor outside the presentation? Please. I would like to ask all of you to be so kind as to send me pictures of your business environments that are cleared, of course, for publication, and of yourselves on duty, because it is sad to say that we don't have a repository of ATSEP pictures from around the world, so we can use in our presentations. Small videos would be fine as well. My email, you can find it on the website if you go in the executive board, or it is on the first slide of my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Theo, for that. You'll consider it done since our SATSEPA president is also part of this. She will handle that part, and I think we will be then sending those to you. Over to you, Program Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkululeko, and your guest for summing up our conversation quite nicely. Thank you very much, Theo, for availing yourself. I know that you've been playing musical chairs today. You were in India, now you are in South Africa, but your presence is highly appreciated, and so is your contribution. Fellow participants, our story is told for today. It has been an absolute pleasure to be graced by your presence. The insightful comments and questions that were posed during this discussion are highly appreciated. Organizers of this masterclass invited speakers and moderators that have valuable knowledge that will certainly benefit the aviation industry. We are eternally thankful to the organizers for carefully choosing today's lineup. I think we no longer have the luxury of inviting commentators who will present beautiful concepts that will create excellent or eloquently put sound bites or buzzwords. I think we need to continue on this trajectory as we have witnessed today of being deliberate on bringing in speakers that will leave this platform with a responsibility, and that will be to do something about that which they have presented here. As a parting shot, I have indeed received my purchase order with a broad smile. It has been a great doing business with you. Do enjoy the remainder of the International ATSEP Day. It's a wrap from us. Salani buhle. Goodbye.
Afternoon, guys. The live session has ended. You can come back to life now.
Well done, team.
Back to your session now.
Thank you, Mr. Producer. Well done, everyone.
Nice presentations there.
Well done.
I've got translation for that question. If Google Translate is correct. It says, how long are trainings for ATSEP done?
Oh, Can we all come in and take a photo?
Where's Buitumelo?
I'll use my camera.
Now we had to kick Buitumelo out because of the number, but I'm sure she can come back now.
Buitumelo and Kulegani.
Yeah.
Come back for a picture.
I don't see everyone.
Even the president is not here. Okay, let me request them to join. And even Nkululeko left. There you go. Theo, how did it go in India?
It went well along the same lines, I would say. And I think that the most important thing is raising awareness, especially for the younger generation.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You guys did a fantastic job, by the way. Congratulations, Mr. Project Manager. And to all of you, I will take a picture now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we are all back in here. We can take the picture.
Oh.
Oscar, I don't know if you have means to do that, or should we use our camera?
From my side, I cannot see the bigger screen anymore. I'm only seeing you guys at the bottom. So I think you're the only ones there who can see everyone in a bigger screen, kind of.
Wait, guys. I can see everybody. I'll take the picture because I'm not in the picture.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think you can do that.
I can also see. Wait. I'm taking a couple of pictures. Don't worry, you'll have options to choose from. Okay, I think I've taken enough pictures, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, good.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, Ngulo was not in the pictures.
There he is. He's back.
He's here.
Yeah.
Where?
Bottom left from on my screen.
Bottom left.
Please go in.
On my screen is bottom left.
Your camera.
It's on.
Oh no, I cannot see you.
You do icon.
Hey, can somebody else try then?
Okay. Let me try from my side.
It's also bottom left from my side.
No, it's also I cannot see him.
So who's bottom left on your side, Gugu?
Uitumelo.
Oh, I get. But top right?
Sam.
Oh, amen. I give up.
Have you taken a picture? I got to finish it. She has it.
Oh, Rafila, she has it.
Okay.
Okay, then we're good. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you to all the participants. That was nicely done. Thank you, Komotso. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.